The United States and France, among others, have warned all parties against escalation in the Middle East. It came after 2 hours of Israeli warplanes carrying out strikes on southern Lebanon, the heaviest on the country since the war in Gaza began. Israel suggested the attack was preemptive, targeting over 100 rocket launchers that it claimed were ready to be fired against it. The tensions rose earlier this week after simultaneous explosions of handheld devices in Lebanon killed at least 37 people and injured thousands more. Richardson reports.
Hours of heavy bombing in southern Lebanon. The Israeli army says it struck roughly 100 rocket launchers and 1,000 barrels, quote, ready to be used. Yet on Friday morning, sirens wailed again on the Israeli side of the border. Hezbollah is believed to have some 150,000 rockets and missiles. And it says it will maintain pressure on Israel as long as it continues its war in Gaza.
Iran can send Hezbollah as many weapons as needed. Hezbollah has access to a whole panel of weapons it did not have in the last war with Israel in 2006.
After the mass attack on Hezbollah's communication devices, attributed to Israel, which has not claimed responsibility for it, countries, including Israel's allies, have urged all parties to de-escalate.
We will continue to stand by Israel's right to defend itself, but we don't want to see any party escalate this conflict, period.
But Israel's government said it intends to intensify military pressure.
Our goal is to ensure the safe return of Israel's northern communities to their homes. As time goes by, Hezbollah will pay an increasing price.
Hezbollah's leader said hours earlier his group is ready to fight, including in the case Israel launches a ground invasion.
We wish they would enter our Lebanese territory. We wish. As soon as a tank or vehicle moves, the resistance shells it.
On both sides of the border, villages have been empty for months. Their residents have been displaced to safer areas.
Well, for more, we can speak to Simon Mabon, a lecturer in international relations and Middle East studies at Lancaster University. Thank you for speaking to Paris Direct. In that report, we heard Israel say it's not backing down. We heard Hezbollah say it's not backing down. Where do you think this is headed?
Yeah, it's interesting. We hear global actors suggesting that there needs to be a call to de-escalate tensions, to really ratchet down what's been happening. But then if you listen carefully to what Hezbollah has been saying, they are articulating a position of what they deem to be strength without wanting to escalate further. If we listen carefully to what the Israelis are saying, they're entering a new phase of conflict, a new strategic part of this war. So I do worry that whilst there are calls for de-escalation, they're not necessarily being reproduced on the ground.
Yeah, and even if Hezbollah is perhaps a little bit more cautious with that acknowledgement, as you mentioned, there are also all these other Iranian proxies that could maybe step up and retaliate on their behalf, couldn't they?
Yeah, I mean, it's a complex environment right now. We've seen over the past year, across the past few decades, in fact, the geopolitical landscape of the Middle East is such that Iran wields a degree of influence, but these actors, you've called them proxy actors, also have their own agendas, their own agency as well, their own grievances. So we've seen Hezbollah operating on its own independently in the past. We've seen the Houthis operating independently. We've seen the Iraqi PMUs, Hamas operating independently. So what we see by that is a complex picture starting to emerge where all it takes is one group, one set of individuals to have a real sense of anger, animosity at the situation, which is what makes it such a precarious moment right now and why these calls for de-escalation are so very important.
Yeah, what we see in the United States, of course, this is an election year, and I don't think Joe Biden or Donald Trump want to see a wider conflict. But when we see Israel say a new phase of war, what do you think the consultations will be between the Biden administration and Benjamin Netanyahu's government?
Well, what I would have hoped the consultations to be is quite bilateral, a good degree of communication between the State Department in the US and Benjamin Netanyahu and his cabinet. The reality, of course, is I'm not convinced that that has been happening. We're hearing briefs, we're hearing leaks from various places across the US and indeed elsewhere in the world from US officials and others that suggest that Israel is operating more unilaterally. It's operating and then informing with limited information. And that suggests that Israel is operating with the expectation that it can get a retrospective sign-off from the US, which, of course, it's been getting for the past year or so, which is a really disconcerting thing. I think that the US has got the ability to wield influence, but as of this past few months, it's either choosing not to wield that influence, or indeed we've misunderestimated it, and it's not able to wield that influence at all.
In Israel, I mean, I'm wondering from Netanyahu's perspective, how much can the Israeli military sustain? And there's a war on Gaza. There's also all the hostages still in Gaza and the families that are saying do more to free them. So what is his situation in terms of how to navigate this increasingly complicated situation?
Well, it's a complicated situation in the sense that his political future is very much on the line. And while he's embroiled in these conflicts, he's essentially safe. He's free from the criminal charges that are facing him for as soon as he steps out of office. So there's an argument to say that he's perpetuating this conflict or this set of conflicts. He's refusing to de-escalate, refusing Washington's overtures to actually de-escalate, to get a ceasefire deal. He's ignoring Western calls for a de-escalation on its northern border with Lebanon. And that is a really disconcerting thing. If we were to see this elsewhere, there would be a lot of global condemnation of quote unquote rogue leaders, of people acting unilaterally. But that's not happening, of course. And it worries me. It worries me that there is someone who is seemingly operating with his own personal and indeed legal interests right at the heart of it, and also fusing that with national security and the colossal devastation of life in Gaza, increasingly in the West Bank, and as we've seen over the past week or so, in southern Lebanon.
Yeah, increasingly tense times. Simon, thank you for your time. Simon Mabon from Lancaster University.